You've been chasing success, love, validation, a sense of meaning. But the more you run, the more lost you feel. In this video, we won't offer you shortcuts or surface-level advice. Instead, we'll take you on a descent into the unconscious and the shadow, and the forgotten parts of yourself. This is not about fixing who you are. It's about remembering what you've buried. When the chase no longer fulfills you, there comes a moment in every life when the chase no longer satisfies, when the taste of ambition turns to ash, when the applause grows hollow, when the very things you once pursued with fire in your eyes become the chains around your soul. This moment is not the end of you, though it may feel like death. It is the whisper of something ancient stirring within you. A buried truth clawing its way out from beneath the mask you forgot you were wearing. You've run long enough. You've chased long enough. Now it is time to stop. Not because you're weak, but because you are finally strong enough to listen. There is a deeper voice beneath the one you've obeyed your entire life. And it does not shout. It waits in silence, patient, eternal, watching from the depths. And only when the surface has cracked, only when the ego is tired of pretending, does the soul speak. We were all born into a dream, but no one told us it wasn't our own. We inherited the dreams of our parents, the longings of our ancestors, the burdens of a world drunk on distraction. We were taught to chase approval, chase love, chase validation, chase worth. And so we did. We ran faster, climbed higher, smiled wider. But we forgot the cost. We forgot that in chasing what we were told to want, we abandoned what we truly are. The self, at the eternal radiant core of who we are, cannot be reached by running. It emerges when we stop, when we descend, when we confront the darkness we've spent our whole lives avoiding. Carl Jung knew what the modern world forgets. The gold is hidden in the shadow. The treasure you seek is guarded by the very monsters you refuse to face. You are not broken because you are tired. You are tired because you've been running from yourself. And now finally the chase has failed you as it was always meant to. This is grace in disguise. This is the threshold of awakening. The unconscious is not your enemy. It is your mirror. Every dream, every fear, every strange impulse, these are not mistakes of biology. They are messages, symbols, echoes of a vast psychic ocean beneath the surface of your mind. Most people never dive. They skim along the top, terrified of depth. But those who dare to descend, not to escape, but to confront, they are the ones who transform. Not by force, not by control, but by surrendering to the inner alchemy that turns shadow into strength. Your shadow is not evil. It is exiled. It is the wounded child you disowned, the rage you buried, the desire you labeled too much, the truth you thought you had to silence in order to survive. But repression does not erase. It festers. It waits. And eventually it leaks through the cracks of your perfect life, sabotaging relationships, feeding addictions, leaving you confused and ashamed. Not because you are weak, but because you are haunted by parts of yourself you never learned to love. To awaken is not to become someone new. It is to remember who you were before the world taught you to forget. The unconscious is not beneath you. It is within you. A mythic realm where archetypes dance, the hero, the orphan, the rebel, the sage. These are not mere ideas. They are living forces that shape your thoughts, your choices, your patterns. You are never just you. You are a theater of gods and monsters, light and shadow, past and future, all converging in this fragile moment called now. When you are tired of chasing, you begin to feel again. The numbness fades. The grief comes. The confusion. The ache. But do not mistake this for failure. It is your soul thawing. Let it hurt. Let it flood. Let it burn away everything that is false. You were never meant to carry the weight of a persona you didn't choose. The persona is a mask, useful, necessary, but not the self. It is how we survive. But we do not heal by living in disguise. At some point, the mask begins to suffocate the face beneath it. And that is when the soul revolts. You feel it, don't you, that quiet rebellion, that subtle pull towards something unnamed. It is not ambition. It is not desire. It is older than language, a sacred longing to come home to yourself. The world may call it madness, but the mystics call it initiation. Jung called it individuation, the lifelong process of becoming whole. Not perfect. Whole. To reclaim every fragment of yourself scattered across the landscape of your life. To descend into the chaos within, not to conquer it, but to dialogue with it. To understand the language of your own psyche. To stop editing yourself to be acceptable. To become real. The anima, the animus. The sacred feminine and masculine within. Have you heard their voices? The anima appears in the dreams of men cloaked in mystery, longing to soften the hardness of ego. The animus stirs in the unconscious of women fierce and wild, demanding truth, where silence once ruled. These inner figures are not fantasies. They are the bridge between the conscious and unconscious mind. They are the gatekeepers of transformation. Ignore them and you remain fragmented. Embrace them and the self begins to emerge. But you must go deeper still. You must enter the cave. The one you fear to enter, as Joseph Campbell wrote, holds the treasure you seek. This is not poetry. This is the psychological reality of becoming. The cave is your wound, the trauma you hide, the shame you deny, and yes, the love you withheld from yourself. It is dark. It is terrifying. But it is sacred. Because only in the darkness does the inner light reveal itself. The light that was never gone, only covered. And so you stop chasing. You close your eyes. You breathe. You feel the tremble of everything you once ran from. And you do not flinch. You do not escape. You stay. You suffer consciously. You grieve what you lost, not just in the world, but in yourself. And that grief becomes the doorway, a sacred threshold through which you must pass if you are to awaken. Stillness isn't laziness, it's spiritual readiness. There is a silence that is not empty, a stillness that is not apathy. Beneath the noise of modern life, beneath the urgency, the scrolling, the hustle masked as virtue, there lies a sacred pause. And in that pause, something watches. Something ancient. Something alive. But most flee from it. They cannot bear the weight of their own stillness. Because in silence the masks fall. In silence the soul begins to speak, and what it says may unmake everything you thought you were. This is why we run, not because we are lazy, but because we are terrified of what we might find if we stop. The world does not fear laziness. It fears awakening. And stillness is the soil from which awakening grows. You have been taught to equate stillness with weakness, to measure your worth by motion, to prove your value by exhaustion. But this is not wisdom. It is collective psychosis. It is a culture that worships the persona and starves the soul. The persona, that polished mask you wear to navigate the world, thrives on performance. But the self, the true center of your being, is not interested in performance. It waits in the depths. It emerges only in stillness. When the stage is empty and the lights are off. When you are no longer performing even for yourself. It is then, and only then, that you begin to see. Carl Jung understood this. He knew that the modern person is deeply disconnected from the unconscious, from the dream world, the mythic world, the realm of symbols and shadows. We are overdeveloped in intellect and starving in soul. We think stillness is regression. We think rest is failure. But in truth, the refusal to be still is a defense against the unconscious. To be still is to listen, and listening is dangerous. Because what you hear may shatter the story you've built your life upon. But that is not a tragedy. That is a beginning. Every true transformation begins in stillness, not in motion, not in conquest, but in descent. The descent into the inner world, into the forgotten corridors of the psyche, requires the courage to stop, to be still long enough for the unconscious to rise. Not with answers, but with symbols, with dreams, with moods you do not understand, with memories that ache and truths that unsettle. This is the threshold of inner alchemy, the space where the ego loosens its grip and the self begins to stir. But you must be still to feel it. You must be still to remember. The mythologies of every ancient people understood this sacred pause. The desert, the cave, the underworld. These were not just places of exile. They were the wombs of transformation. Christ withdrew for 40 days. Buddha sat beneath the Bodhi tree. Every hero before they rise must first disappear, must first fall into silence, must first be stripped of all illusions. This is the necessity of spiritual stillness, not as retreat from life, but as preparation for rebirth. For you cannot walk into the world whole if you have never met the parts of yourself buried beneath the noise. The shadow lives in silence. It is not found on the surface where you curate your image and justify your behavior. It waits beneath, in the quiet, in the uncomfortable, in the stillness you avoid. And it will not come out through force. It will not be exposed by analysis alone. It emerges when you stop resisting, when you sit in the ache, when you do nothing but feel and allow what has been suppressed to rise. This is not laziness. This is confrontation, and there is nothing more courageous. In the world of the psyche, the deepest movements often begin with stillness, like tectonic plates shifting in the dark, like seeds breaking open in the soil. Nothing seems to be happening, yet everything is. You are being rearranged from within. The ego hates this. It wants progress it can measure, growth it can display. It wants to feel in control. But the soul does not care for appearances. It seeks wholeness. And sometimes wholeness requires undoing, not action, not striving, but unraveling. Not because you are failing, but because you are preparing to emerge from a deeper place than before. The anima and animus, the sacred feminine and masculine energies within, also awaken in stillness. The anima comes in dreams, in images, in quiet invitations to feel, to soften, to open. The animus whispers truth, conviction, presence. These archetypal forces do not shout above the noise. They whisper beneath it. And unless you are still, you will never hear them. You will mistake your conditioning for your calling. You will live someone else's life and call it your own. But the soul will know. The unconscious will grieve. And sooner or later, your symptoms will speak the truth your ego cannot. Stillness is not a pause in the journey. It is part of the journey. It is the crossing of the threshold, the moment before rebirth when everything goes quiet and the old world dissolves. But you must resist the urge to fill that void. You must not reach for distraction or run back into the familiar. You must remain. You must endure the stillness until the self reveals what the ego was too busy to see. This is where healing begins, not in striving to be better, but in finally being here. Fully, raw, honest, unmoving, to feel what you have not felt, to hear what you have not heard, to see for the first time the vast and trembling beauty of your own inner world. This is spiritual readiness. This is the soil of individuation. And it is from this place that the true journey begins. How to detach without losing yourself. There is a kind of pain that doesn't scream. It whispers. It lingers. It lives in the quiet space between what you gave Evos and what was never returned. It waits in the pause after the message you didn't send, in the glance you didn't receive, in the love you offered into an abyss. To detach, truly detach, is not to stop caring. It is to stop bleeding for what will not hold you. But detachment is not abandonment. It is not numbness nor cold withdrawal. True detachment is sacred. It is the reclamation of your energy from the prisons of projection. It is the soul returning to itself. Most do not know how to let go without collapsing. They were never taught that you can release without rejecting, that you can separate without severing your soul. We live in a world of entanglements. Emotional, psychological, spiritual. From childhood, we are conditioned to attach our identity to others, to be the pleaser, the caretaker, the savior, the mirror, and slowly the self begins to blur. Not erased, but buried beneath layers of unconscious agreements. I'll be what you need, if you love me. But love that requires your disappearance is not love. It is control dressed as connection. Jung wrote that individuation is the process of becoming who you truly are. Apart from collective expectations, familial projections, and unconscious bonds. And to individuate, you must detach not as escape, but as return. You must walk backward through the labyrinth of false identities until you find the thread that leads home. The unconscious craves wholeness. It will not allow the self to remain enslaved to roles that suffocate it. So it sends signals, dreams, symptoms, anxiety, depression. Not as punishments, but as invitations. Each heartbreak is a message. Each loss a mirror. The relationships that break you are not accidents. They are archetypal dramas unfolding to awaken you. The wounded healer, the orphan, the shadow lover. These are not just people, they are mirrors of parts of you yet to be integrated. And when you stay entangled, when you cannot detach, it is often because a part of you believes you still need their reflection to exist. But the truth is, your wholeness does not depend on being seen by others. It depends on seeing yourself. To detach is not to float away. It is to root deeply into your own being, into your own truth, into your own silence. It is to say, I will no longer abandon myself to earn connection. I will no longer betray my soul for harmony that costs me my integrity. The anima, the inner feminine, teaches this through grief, through intuition, through surrender. The animus, the inner masculine, teaches it through boundaries, through clarity, through will. When both are awakened within you, you no longer cling out of need. You connect out of choice. You no longer dissolve into others. You meet them as a whole. But first, you must see where your attachments have become addictions, where longing has become bondage, where love has become self-erasure. This is shadow work, not glamorous, not easy, but sacred. The shadow is where we hide the truths we think will make us unlovable. Our rage, our fear, our hunger, our power. And when these parts remain unintegrated, we seek them in others. We project them. We crave what we lack and call it destiny. But projection is a distortion. It is the unconscious saying, "Here is a part of you, find it, reclaim it, own it." And until you do, you will mistake dependency for devotion. You will call attachment love and wonder why it hurts. Jung said that we do not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. To detach without losing yourself, you must descend into that darkness, into the archetypal patterns that bind you. You must ask, what part of me needed this bond? What part of me is afraid to let go? Is it the abandoned child, the rejected lover, the silent protector? These are not flaws. These are fragments. And they do not need judgment. They need presence. When you sit with these parts, not to fix them, but to hear them, something begins to shift. The energy you once gave away begins to return. Not all at once, but drop by sacred drop. Detachment is not a closing of the heart. It is the opening of vision. The heart that is truly open does not attach to what harms it. It sees. It grieves. It releases. And it continues to love, not because it must, but because it can. This is the paradox. When you are whole within, you can connect without losing yourself. When you are rooted in yourself, you can love without chains. You no longer need to be completed. You are no longer trapped in the archetype of the seeker. You become the witness, the creator, the sovereign. But this path requires the death of the identity you built around the need to be needed. The death of the fantasy that someone else will save you from yourself. These deaths hurt. They tear through the soul like fire. But they clear the space where yourself can finally breathe. The hero's journey is not just about slaying dragons. It is about walking away from the castles that imprison you, even if you helped build them. It is about standing in the ashes of who you were and listening for the voice that has always been calling from within. This voice does not beg. It does not chase. It does not plead to be chosen. It whispers truths that the ego resists. You are already whole. You do not need to be seen to be real. You do not need to be held to be free. But until you believe this, until you embody it, you will remain entangled. Not because you are broken, but because you forgot. And detachment in its deepest form is the remembering. It is the soul waking up from the dream of dependency and saying, I am not here to disappear into others. I am here to become myself. The void isn't punishment. It's initiation. There comes a time when everything falls away. The plans, the certainty, the names you called yourself. The world once familiar becomes a stranger. You look in the mirror and don't recognize the eyes staring back. What once gave you meaning now feels hollow. What once gave you comfort now brings ache. And in this barren silence, you are tempted to believe you are being punished, forsaken, forgotten, abandoned by life itself. But the void is not your enemy. It is not a curse. It is the space between stories, the sacred womb, where the old self dissolves and the true self is born. This is not the end. It is initiation. The death before rebirth. The pause before the becoming. The ego, desperate for control, will claw for clarity. It will call the void depression, failure, regression. But the soul knows. The soul remembers. It knows that every myth worth telling begins with exile, with the hero cast out, with the wanderer stripped bare, Christ in the desert, Buddha beneath the tree, Inanna in the underworld. This is the place where the false gods of your life are torn down, the idols of success, identity, approval, and you are left alone with the one thing you have always avoided: yourself. But this self is not small. It is vast, cosmic, terrifying in its beauty. It cannot be found while the world is loud. It can only be remembered in silence. And so the void arrives not as punishment, but as invitation. You are not broken because you feel lost. You are being broken open. The structures you built around your persona, the polished mask you wore to survive, are no longer enough. And that is why it all feels like crumbling. Because it is. The house of the ego cannot contain the fire of the soul. Something deeper is asking to emerge. But first the shell must crack. The patterns must unravel. The illusions must die. This is the threshold Jung called individuation, and the path towards psychological wholeness, where the self rises from the depths and begins to take the throne the ego once held. The unconscious is not chaos. It is cosmos in disguise. Beneath your thoughts, beneath your pain, there is a myth unfolding. Archetypes moving, symbols speaking. The void is the place where they become visible when the noise dies down and the deeper language of the psyche begins to echo. You dream differently here. You remember forgotten parts of yourself. You meet the shadow, the parts you exiled to be accepted, the emotions you labeled dangerous. But they are not here to harm you. They are your guides, guardians of the treasure buried in your depths. To navigate the void, you must surrender, not collapse, not escape, surrender. You must lay down your maps and learn to read the stars again. You must stop asking the mind to make sense of what only the soul understands. The anima speaks in images. The animus speaks in presence. Both ask you to trust the invisible, to enter the cave with no guarantee of what you'll find. But you will find something, not a new identity to cling to, but the awareness that you never needed one. You will find that you are not the roles you played, nor the titles you wore, nor the dreams you chased. You are the space beneath all of it, eternal, untouched, awake. And this is the terror of the void. Not that you are nothing, but that you are everything you feared you could be. That your power does not come from what you do, but from who you are when all doing stops. This power is not force. It is presence. It is stillness that bends reality. It is the center that holds while everything else falls away. And once you touch it, you will never again settle for a life that asks you to betray your soul to feel safe. But first you must pass through the night. You must feel what you have avoided. You must let the silence strip you. Let the grief baptize you. Let the darkness teach you to see with different eyes. This is not a crisis. It is a crossing, a sacred dismembering. And though the ego may scream, the self is being formed in the fire. Not the fire of ambition, but of transmutation. This is inner alchemy, the dissolving of the false into the gold of the real. And it is always preceded by emptiness, by nothingness, by the terrifying beauty of the void. So stay. Do not run. Do not numb. Do not rush to fill the silence with noise. The void has its own music, a song older than language, a vibration that speaks directly to the archetypes within you, the seeker, the destroyer, the creator, the sage. You are not alone in this darkness. You are in sacred company. You are walking the path every soul must walk when it is ready to awaken. And if you can hold the void, if you can meet it, not with fear, but with reverence, you will emerge changed. Not improved, not fixed, but revealed. You will walk differently, speak differently, love differently. Because you will no longer be searching for wholeness, you will be living from it. You will no longer confuse emptiness with lack. You will recognize it as space, sacred space, creative space, the place from which the self creates not to impress, but to express, not to perform, but to be. This is what it means to be reborn, not into a new version of your ego, but into the timeless truth of your being. This is why your reality keeps repeating. You keep walking into the same room, only the wallpaper has changed. The faces are new, but the patterns are old. The same betrayals, the same disappointments, the same echoes in different voices. And you wonder why. You wonder if you're cursed or broken or simply unlucky. But the truth is far more unsettling and far more liberating. Your life is not repeating by accident. It's repeating because something within you remains unheard. The unconscious mind is not passive. It is a stage director arranging scenes and characters that reflect your inner landscape. Until you face what you've hidden, life will keep playing it back louder each time until you listen. This is not punishment. This is the soul's persistence. Carl Jung said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." Fate, that word we throw around when we've forgotten how to look inward. But fate is not some cruel puppeteer. It is the reflection of your psyche projected onto the canvas of the world. The people you attract, the patterns you replay, the wounds that get reopened, they are not random. They are messages, mirrors, archetypal encounters sent from the depths to wake you up. And yet most remain asleep, caught in the trance of repetition, confusing familiarity with truth. But repetition is not truth. It is a signal. And behind that signal is a door. To step through that door, you must stop blaming the world for what it reveals. The lover who abandons you, the friend who betrays you, the job that drains you. These are not just external events, they are symbolic encounters. They are expressions of an inner split, an inner wound, an inner archetype crying out for recognition. The abandoned inner child, the tyrannical inner critic, the silenced voice. These live within you, shaping your lens, coloring your choices, drawing you toward what feels familiar, even if that familiarity hurts. Because the psyche does not seek happiness. It seeks wholeness. And sometimes it repeats the pain not to torture you, but to finally bring it to light. This is shadow work, not just understanding your trauma, but confronting the ways it still puppeteers your life. The ways you seek love in places where it was never offered. The ways you abandon yourself to be accepted. The ways you unconsciously recreate your own suffering to feel in control. The shadow is not just what you hide, it's what you enact, what you project, what you mistake for destiny. And unless you face it, you will live inside a loop, mistaking the cage for a calling. But there is another way, a deeper path, a turning inward. It begins not with answers, but with questions. What am I trying to resolve through this person? What am I chasing in this pattern? What part of me still believes I must suffer to be seen? These are not questions for the mind. They are doorways to the unconscious. And through them, you begin to see the architecture of your inner world and the archetypes playing behind the scenes, the stories you inherited, the masks you wear without knowing it. The persona, the image you project to survive, is often crafted from these loops. It tells the world I'm fine while your soul bleeds underneath. It plays the role expected of you, the strong one, the smart one, the good one, the quiet one. But every mask you wear distances you from your truth. And the further you drift, the louder the patterns become. Because the self, your wholeness, your truth will not let you go. It wants to be known. It wants to live. And if it must break your patterns to reach you, it will. Dreams carry this same message. They speak in symbols and riddles in mythic language. The same figures appear, the same themes unfold, the chase, the fall, the forgotten house, the locked door. You wake up and think, that was strange. But it wasn't strange. It was sacred. It was the psyche showing you where you are stuck, where your energy is trapped, where the loop has begun to calcify. And if you ignore it, if you dismiss it, life will carry the message into your waking world. What is not faced in dreams becomes reality. Not to destroy you, but to make you whole. This is the hero's journey, but not the one sold in stories of conquest and glory. This is the inner descent. The confrontation with the dragon of repetition. The meeting with the wounded child, the exiled shadow, the unlived life. And it begins with the courage to pause, to no longer react blindly, to say, what if this is not happening to me, but for me? What if this pain is a symbol? That question is the sword. And with it, you cut through the illusion that you are powerless. You reclaim your role not as victim of your past, but as author of your becoming. The anima and animus, those sacred inner forces, come alive in this work. They help balance what has been distorted. The anima teaches receptivity, feeling intuition, all the qualities the wounded masculine within you may have repressed. The animus brings clarity, direction, truth, the backbone that the wounded feminine may have surrendered. When they awaken, you stop seeking completion through others. You become whole within, and from that wholeness, the patterns dissolve. The loops unravel. Not because life gets easier, but because you stop reenacting what no longer belongs to you. And so your reality stops repeating when you do. When you become aware. When you stop running and start listening. When you let go of the familiar ache and choose the unfamiliar peace. This is not instant. It is not linear. It is a sacred spiral descending deeper, circling closer, moving toward the center of your being. And the center does not repeat. The center creates. From presence, from truth, from stillness. The universe doesn't listen to words. It listens to energy. It listens to what you are not, what you say. It listens to the vibration beneath your actions, the frequency behind your smile, the ancient rhythm that pulses through your being when the masks fall away. You can lie with language. You can wear a perfect face, utter noble intentions, recite spiritual mantras, with lips still drenched in fear. But the unconscious cannot be deceived. The universe, like the deep self, hears only the truth behind the truth. And it speaks in symbols and patterns, in the silent gravity of your essence. There is a force moving through you that no words can reach. Call it soul, call it psyche, call it the field in which your ego floats like a leaf, pretending to be the tree. Whatever name you give it, you felt it in the nights when silence pressed so close, it spoke in the dreams that seemed to know you better than your waking mind, in the aching pull towards something more real than your persona could allow. That force does not operate in logic or grammar. It does not care for appearances or proclamations. It moves like music through the bones, like myth through the bloodline, like a forgotten god whispering beneath your thoughts. This is what the universe hears. And this is what must be reconciled if you ever wish to become whole. But most people live on the surface of themselves, skimming across the shallows of persona, echoing borrowed convictions, terrified of what might rise from the depths if they stopped performing for even a moment. Because beneath that mask is the shadow. And the shadow does not lie. It holds every piece of you you've denied, every impulse you've moralized, every truth you've shoved into the basement of your being because it didn't fit the story you wanted others to see. The shadow is the part of you the ego cannot control, and so it pretends it isn't there, but it is. It waits. It watches. It shapes your life behind the veil of your own blindness. And the universe listens to it, not your curated identity. It listens to your unconscious, to the wound you refuse to name, to the suppressed rage and unclaimed grief, to the hungry child exiled in your psyche, banging on the walls of your dreams. The only way to shift your energy truly irrevocably is not through positive thinking or affirmations. It is through descent. Descent into the unconscious. Descent into the underworld of your soul. Into the places you've avoided all your life because they are too raw, too dark, too powerful. Jung called this the confrontation with the shadow. It is not therapy. It is not self-help. It is initiation, the path of the wounded healer, the dark night of the ego, the terrifying sacred process of becoming real. When you finally stop running and turn to face what you've buried, the symbols will come alive. The serpent, the wolf, the devouring mother, the tyrant king, these archetypes will rise from your inner world, not as enemies, but as guides. They are the living language of the psyche. They do not argue. They do not explain. They appear. They possess. They mirror back to you your forgotten power, twisted through the distortion of fear. And if you are brave enough to listen, not with your ears, but with your energy, they will teach you how to alchemize what was once rejected, to reclaim what was once disowned, to integrate what was once called bad into something holy. Because energy doesn't lie. The energy you carry is the accumulation of every choice you didn't make consciously, every emotion you didn't feel, fully every part of yourself you left behind to be accepted, to be loved, to survive. And so you walk around leaking old wounds while your mouth speaks of healing. You attract mirrors, not miracles. You repeat patterns not because you're cursed, but because the universe is giving you a reflection, not of your words, but of your vibration. And vibration is shaped not by intention, but by integration. Integration is the alchemy of the inner world. It is the art of holding the tension of opposites, the darkness and the light, the beast and the angel, the rage and the compassion, without letting one destroy the other. This is where the true work begins. Not in controlling the outer world, but in transforming the inner terrain. Not in manifesting from the ego's craving, but in aligning with the self's deeper knowing. Not in saying the right thing, but in becoming the right vessel. Your body knows when your energy is out of alignment. It tightens, it recoils, it grows ill. Not because it is broken, but because it is trying to speak to you in the only language the unconscious knows: symptoms, sensations, synchronicities. If you ignore these signs, if you stay addicted to performance, to productivity, to being seen as good, you will suffer. But if you begin to listen, if you begin to feel, instead of fix to descend, instead of ascend to be honest, instead of nice, then the unconscious becomes your ally. Then the shadow becomes a portal. Then the very things that once haunted you become the very things that set you free. Because the universe cannot give you what you say you want. It can only give you what you are. And who you are is not your persona, not your Instagram feed, not the roles you play in relationships. Who you are is the totality of your inner landscape, conscious and unconscious, wounded and wise, monstrous and divine. The closer you move toward that wholeness, the more your energy shifts. And when your energy shifts, reality bends. Not because you manipulated it, but because you finally became congruent. The signal you're sending is clean. coherent, aligned. And that is when the universe responds. You've been manifesting from trauma, not truth. You've been manifesting from trauma, not truth. You've been calling in realities shaped not by your soul, but by your wounds. The life you're building, the love you're chasing, the dreams you obsess over, they didn't rise from your essence. They rose from the ache, from the abandonment, from the parts of you that were never seen, never held, never allowed to be. And because those parts remained exiled in the unconscious, they began whispering to the universe in a language your conscious mind could not hear. You said you wanted love, but your body remembered betrayal. You said you wanted peace, but your nervous system only knew war. You said you wanted abundance, but your inner child still believed safety meant invisibility. And so your reality began to reflect not your words, not your vision boards or mantras, but the silent energy of your unresolved past. The psyche is not a blank canvas. It is a deep forest, ancient and alive, filled with forgotten pathways, sleeping archetypes, and shadows that mimic your voice. Most people walk into manifestation like it's a clean slate, like they can plaster desires over unexamined fears and call it clarity. But the unconscious does not forget. It stores every moment the child cried without comfort, every time your truth was punished, every instance you had to shrink to be safe. And from that buried graveyard of pain, a distorted compass begins to form, pointing not toward yourself, but toward survival, toward compensation, toward becoming what the world wanted instead of what the soul is. And this is what most people call desire. But it is not desire, it is echo. Trauma dressed in the costume of dreams. You cannot manifest wholeness while staying fractured. You cannot call in a conscious partner while disowning your own inner masculine or feminine. You cannot summon abundance if you secretly equate power with punishment. You cannot demand authenticity from the world if your entire identity is a mask. The truth is this: you attract what you are, not what you want. And if what you are is a fragmented collage of coping mechanisms, archetypal imbalances, and emotional avoidance, then your life will mirror that fragmentation, not as a punishment, but as a sacred invitation to awaken. Jung said that until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. And that is what trauma does. It scripts your fate behind the curtain of your awareness. It distorts your perception, edits your memories, attaches meaning to random chaos, and compels you to repeat the very cycles you swore you'd never enter again. Because the wound is trying to complete itself. It is trying to be seen. It is trying to restage the original pain in hopes that this time you'll choose differently. But instead of healing, most reenact. They choose the same archetype in a different costume, the same abandonment with a new accent, the same betrayal wrapped in better manners, and call it a new chapter. But it's not a new chapter. It's a deeper loop. To escape the loop, you must go inward, not outward. You must stop seeking and start remembering. Because the truth is already inside you, but it's buried beneath layers of protective lies. Lies you told yourself to make sense of a world that didn't hold you. Lies like I'm too much, I'm not enough. Love is earned. Vulnerability is weakness. These were not truths. These were survival spells, beliefs, forged in the fire of adaptation. And like all spells, they shaped your energy. They carved grooves into your aura. They became the signal you sent into the field. And the field responded. Energy doesn't lie. It doesn't care about your goals. It cares about your coherence, about your alignment with self. And when you're fermented, when your soul says one thing, but your shadow screams another, the field listens to the louder voice. And the louder voice is almost always the one you're ignoring, the one you locked in the basement of your psyche because it made you feel shame or rage or helplessness. But that voice holds the key, because the shadow isn't your enemy, it's your map. It contains everything you rejected, everything you feared, everything that holds your lost power. To reclaim your life, you must reclaim your shadow. Not conquer it, not cleanse it, but integrate it. Integration is the sacred marriage of opposites. It is when the inner orphan meets the inner king, when the exiled witch takes the hand of the rational priest, when the wild feminine dances with the disciplined masculine. It is when your symbols stop screaming and start guiding, when your dreams stop disturbing you and begin awakening you, when you no longer need to manifest from lack because you've become the source of safety, of worth, of belonging. And in that state, not of perfection, but of wholeness, you begin to attract not from need, but from being, from soul, from truth. And when truth becomes your frequency, reality reorganizes. You no longer chase what depletes you. You no longer tolerate the energy of your trauma. You no longer pray for what you once begged for, because the begging itself was born from a false belief in your separation from the divine. But the divine was never outside you. It was in your pain, in your longing, in your breakdowns, in the moments you thought you were lost but were actually being initiated. The universe was never punishing you, it was sculpting you, not into something better, but into something real. The mask you wear is why you're not free. The mask you wear is why you're not free. It smiles when your soul wants to scream. It nods politely when your boundaries are being crossed. It agrees to what your heart quietly pleads against. And you wear it so well, don't you? So seamlessly that even you have forgotten it's a mask. But underneath the truth festers. Underneath, there is a rawness, an ache, a self-exiled long ago, waiting for you to remember who you were before the world told you who to be. This mask was never meant to be your identity. It was meant to protect you. But protection, when prolonged, becomes a prison. And now you mistake the mask for the face, the persona, for the person, the performance, for the presence. You wonder why you feel disconnected, why no relationship ever truly sees you, why success tastes hollow. It is because no one can see you not through the armor, not through the performance. They are seeing the character you became to survive. But the soul was never meant to survive. It was meant to live. And life begins where the mask ends. The persona Jung's name for this social mask is not inherently evil. It is a necessary fiction, a costume worn to function within the collective, a translation of your depths into a language the world can understand. But when the persona becomes your only voice, your only skin, your only story, you forget the script you're living isn't yours. You become a ghost, haunting your own life, mouthing lines written by your upbringing, your culture, your fears. The real you, wild, divine, contradictory, becomes buried beneath the need to be liked, to be good, to be safe. And so you shrink, you dim, you twist yourself into something digestible. But the soul does not negotiate, and the soul does not bend to approval. It howls. It cracks. It rages against the lie that says you must betray your truth in order to belong. Because real belonging requires real presence. And presence cannot emerge through a persona. You wear the mask to be accepted, but acceptance of the mask is rejection of the soul. That's the trade. That's the cost. Every time you abandon your truth to maintain the performance, you deepen the wound. The wound of invisibility. The wound of being loved for who you are not. And over time, that wound becomes chronic. It infects your relationships, your art, your path. It seeps into every moment of stillness and whispers, "This isn't you." But instead of listening, you distract. You scroll. You chase more accomplishments, more admiration, more noise, hoping that if you just build the mask well enough, you'll feel whole. But wholeness is not built. It is revealed. And it can only be revealed when you're willing to shed the mask and confront the shadow it was hiding. Because beneath every mask is a shadow. The shadow is everything the persona refuses to admit. The rage behind the smile. The grief behind the strength. The lust, the envy, the vulnerability, all the wild, unacceptable truths you repress to maintain the image. But the shadow does not disappear. It waits. It watches. It leaks through the cracks when you're tired, when you're triggered, when the mask slips. And the more you suppress it, the more power it gains. The shadow does not want to destroy you. It wants to free you. But it can only free you if you're willing to meet it. To descend. To look into the mirror without flinching and say, "I see you. You are me." This is the descent into the unconscious. The place where the symbols live, where dreams become maps and wounds become oracles. In this inner world, nothing is what it seems. The anima dances with the animus. The hero trembles before the dragon. The old gods rise from your blood and demand sacrifice not of your body, but of your falsehoods. This is not self-improvement. This is self-retrieval, the sacred alchemy of reuniting with the parts of yourself you once exiled. And in that reunion, something shifts. The mask begins to fall not in defiance, but in reverence. You no longer need it, because you are no longer ashamed of what it was hiding. Freedom begins where self-deception ends, not when you finally become the perfect version of yourself, but when you allow all your versions to exist in one honest being. When the light no longer fears the dark. When the child within you no longer has to pretend to be an adult. When the lover, the warrior, the magician, the orphan, the king, all the archetypes are allowed to speak without censorship. That is integration. That is individuation. Not the pursuit of perfection, but the sacred marriage of opposites within. And from that wholeness, authenticity arises not as a performance, but as presence, as essence. The world is starving for the real, for people who are not playing roles but living truths, people who are not seducing with masks but awakening with energy. But you cannot offer that to the world if you are still hiding from yourself. You cannot liberate others while wearing chains woven from politeness and pretense. Your liberation is an act of rebellion, an act of devotion, an act of remembering who you were before you were taught to perform. And once remembered, the world no longer controls you, because the world can only control the mask. It cannot touch the soul. The part of you that wants more is the part that feels empty. The part of you that wants more is the part that feels empty. It is the hollow echo beneath your ambition, the silent hunger that no praise can satisfy, no possession can soothe. It wears many faces, desire, drive, progress, but underneath it is grief. A grief so ancient it predates your memories. A grief that belongs not just to your life, but to your lineage, your culture, your forgotten self. And this grief is not weakness. It is a signal, a whisper from the unconscious that something vital has been lost. Not taken, not stolen, but abandoned. Abandoned in your pursuit of becoming what the world wanted instead of what the soul needed. You see, the emptiness doesn't mean you lack value. It means you lost contact with it. It means the part of you that was once whole has been buried under years of performing, achieving, and trying to prove that you are enough. But wholeness cannot be earned. It must be remembered. And remembering begins where striving ends. You keep reaching outward because something inside you is unresolved. You keep craving more because you've forgotten what enough feels like. And not the kind of enough the ego settles for, but the soul's enough. The kind of enough that comes from being rooted in truth. The kind of enough that doesn't need applause or validation or escape. But when that inner anchor is missing, you drift. You drift from one identity to the next, from one goalpost to the next, from one illusion of fulfillment to another, always hoping that the next thing and the next achievement, the next relationship, the next spiritual breakthrough will finally make you feel whole. But it never does. Because the hole you're trying to fill is not material. It's psychological. It's archetypal. It's the void at the center of the fragmented self, the place where your truth once lived, before it was fractured by fear, shame, and silence. Jung called this the search for the self, not the ego, not the persona, not the performance, but the deep, eternal self that lives beneath the stories. And to find it, you must stop running from the emptiness. You must enter it. Sit in it. Let it speak. Because the emptiness is not your enemy. It is your initiation. It is the threshold to your inner world, a sacred space carved out by the soul to make room for truth. And like all sacred spaces, it is uncomfortable. It dismantles illusion. It strips away comfort. It confronts you with a raw, unfiltered mirror of your own being. But within that mirror is something holy, the first glimpse of who you were before the mask, before the trauma, before the world handed you a script and told you to play nice. That part of you, the wild, intuitive, sovereign self, is not gone. It is hidden beneath layers of protection. Protection that once served you, but now suffocates you. You were taught to fear your own depths, to distrust your intuition, to silence your anger, to suppress your longing, to dim your joy. You were taught that feeling empty meant you were broken. But it doesn't. It means you are awakening. It means the false structures are crumbling. It means your psyche is rejecting the illusion and calling you back home. Not home to comfort, but home to truth. To the parts of you that were never validated, but always real. The more you resist the emptiness, the louder it grows. It manifests in the body-tight chest, restless nights, chronic fatigue. It shows up in your relationships, projection, blame, detachment. It floods your mind with anxiety and your heart with dread. Not to punish you, but to awaken you, because the soul has no interest in comfort. It wants wholeness, and wholeness requires confrontation. With the shadow, with the wound, with the parts of you that you exiled to survive. Because in that exile is your power. In that silence is your voice. In that emptiness is your essence waiting to be reclaimed. This is the path of individuation. The heroic journey not to become something new, but to return to something ancient. Something eternal. The self of the archetypal center of the psyche, the divine blueprint buried beneath your conditioning. And to reach it, you must travel through the unconscious, through the terrain of dreams, symbols, myths, through the haunted forest of your own psyche where the dragons are not monsters, but lost fragments of your soul. You must face the mother wound, the father complex, the unlived lives, the animus and anima distorted and denied. And you must walk through all of it, not as a victim, not as a savior, but as a seeker, a truth bearer, one who has decided that living half alive is no longer enough. you see the hunger for more isn't wrong. It's just misdirected. You think you want more success, more recognition, more connection. But what you really want is to come back to yourself. You want to feel aligned, integrated, alive. And that can only happen when you stop performing and start listening. Listening to the silence, listening to the ache, listening to the ancient wisdom that pulses beneath your thoughts, waiting for you to become still enough to hear. And when you hear it, really hear it, you'll realize the emptiness was never a flaw. It was a doorway, a sacred wound, a mythic invitation to step beyond the persona and meet the self that has always been watching, waiting, loving you from within the darkness. Wholeness begins where the persona ends. There comes a moment in life when the mirror cracks not from age or accident, but from truth. And in that silent fracture, you see something staring back at you. Not the mask you polished for the world, not the smile you trained to make others comfortable, but something older, wilder, unnamed. Something you've been hiding from since the first time you realized you were expected to be someone. We grow up learning how to play roles: dutiful child, likable friend, obedient citizen, agreeable lover. And we wear these masks so well. We forget there's a face underneath. The persona becomes the prison. A beautiful one, yes, socially acceptable, even rewarded, but a prison nonetheless. Jung said, "The persona is that which in reality one is not, but which oneself, as well as others, think one is." It's the performance we give to be accepted, to belong. But belonging bought at the price of the soul is not belonging. It is exile from oneself. There is a terrible ache in the modern soul, a silent desperation that no achievement, relationship, or distraction can soothe. You scroll, you consume, you adapt. But deep down, a whisper haunts you. This is not who I am. You can feel it in the loneliness that returns even in a crowded room. You can feel it when you lie awake at night, not from fear of death, but from fear of not having lived, not having touched the truth of your being, not having heard the voice that lives beneath your thoughts. This is not anxiety. This is the self calling. The self is not a concept. It is a force, an archetypal current moving beneath the surface of consciousness, seeking not success, but wholeness. And to become whole, the false must die. The persona, your carefully crafted identity, must shatter. Not all at once, not violently, but steadily, honestly, courageously. This is why so many feel lost in their 20s and 30s. Not because something is wrong with them, but because something false is falling away. The breakdown you fear is often the breakthrough you need. Because until the mask cracks, the soul cannot breathe. You were not born to fit in. You were born to become. But becoming demands a descent. You must enter the labyrinth of your unconscious and face what you've hidden there: your anger, your grief, your envy, your fear. These are not flaws. They are fragments, pieces of you that were exiled to preserve the persona. You were taught to suppress your darkness to be good. But repression does not eliminate it, buries. And the buried never dies. It waits. In dreams, in projections, in unexplained reactions, it waits for recognition. This is the shadow, the rejected aspects of yourself that you've disowned to be accepted. And yet, paradoxically, the shadow is not your enemy. It is your gatekeeper. It holds the vitality, the power, the passion you lost when you chose safety over authenticity. To meet your shadow is not to become dark, it is to become whole. Jung wrote, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." There is gold in the shadow if you dare to mine it. There is wisdom in your wounds if you stop running from them. There is freedom on the other side of the fire, if you are willing to walk through it. But this is not a path of comfort. It is a path of confrontation. The unconscious does not reveal itself to the passive. It calls the brave. It demands the death of the known. You will lose friendships that were built on your mask. You will leave careers that were built on your conditioning. You will disappoint people who only loved your performance. But what you lose in approval, you gain in authenticity. And that is a trade the soul is always willing to make. Dreams become your guides here. Symbols become your language. The deeper you go, the more you realize this journey is not linear, it is alchemical. You are being broken to be reformed, disoriented to be redirected, emptied to be filled with something real. The process is not logical, it is mythic. It follows the rhythms of ancient stories, the hero's descent, the meeting with the monster, the death and rebirth, the return with the treasure. You are not broken, you are becoming. And becoming looks like undoing at first. The persona fears this unraveling because it survives on control. But the self thrives in surrender. There is a deeper intelligence moving through you, and it cannot be mapped by the ego. You must trust the chaos. You must trust the silence. You must trust the storm that comes not to destroy you, but to reveal the foundation beneath the facade. That foundation is your essence. And essence cannot be fabricated, it can only be remembered. So many people are exhausted not because life is too much, but because they are too little of themselves. They are living out scripts they didn't write, chasing goals that are not theirs, wearing masks that no longer fit. The body rebels. The mind fragments. The soul retreats. And all of it is a sacred signal you must return. Return to the truth of who you are, beneath the conditioning. Return to the child who danced before shame. Return to the silence that existed before the noise. Return to the self. And when you do, when you take off the mask, not just in solitude but in life, you will feel the terror of exposure, but also the ecstasy of liberation. You will feel vulnerable, yes. But that vulnerability is not weakness. It is the first breath of freedom. To stand in your truth without apology is to step into the arena of wholeness. And that wholeness begins precisely where the persona ends.